Good morning, friends. This morning and tomorrow, we're gonna kind of shift gears and move into having spent a few days talking about the internal and the community, some of the community aspects of a anti-domination plan. Going to shift a little bit to looking at some of the external structural things that, as we heard, I think at the beginning, go hand in hand. That the inward work and the outward work are one. And so, spend a little bit more time with some of that outward structural stuff. First, though, I do want to have one last little detour into how we structure our work together as friends. Yesterday we ended talking about householders and itinerants, and I just want to open some doors to imagination of some different ways that we could imagine organizing our meetings to bring those two creative powers together. This is obviously not a 10-point plan. It's going to be a kind of a stone in the pond to see where the ripples might go. But I've drawn quite a bit of inspiration from a lecture that Noah Merrill gave at Southeastern Yearly Meeting in 2013 that ended up in a pamphlet called Prophets, Midwives, and Thieves, in which he pulls out and looks at the Friends' traditional roles of ministers, elders, and overseers, and renames them because we need some freshness here. And I'm going to borrow two of his three terms and talk about what am I going to do? Yeah, we use prophets and midwives, but also understanding the problematic nature of overseers. Use the word stewards to describe one of those motions of the Spirit, or one of the types of gifts needed. And remembering that yesterday, no, I'm not going to go that direction. I'm going to do this quick and not have a lot of time on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw up a slide of a different way of organizing a meeting that isn't about committees, and then just talk about it for a couple of minutes and then move on to something else. Okay. Because why not? So one of the things that, oh yeah, that's what I was going to say earlier. Two things that I want to remember from yesterday. One from Acts that we talked about is that Holy Spirit, the possession and the abundance of the Holy Spirit and wisdom are prerequisites to filling some roles. And that for our different gifts, we have different tasks. One of the cultural stumbling blocks that I think we are running into as a people is that we confuse often or substitute an idea of sameness for true equality. And in doing that, erase differences that might enable us to be a more full, healthy people together. Because of our training by the empire, the empire wants us to make distinctions and difference and use those difference to rank people in hierarchy. That is deeply problematic and absolutely one of the things that we need to be dealing with internally in our work, as well as amongst one another. So part of our work, I think, in bringing the householders and the itinerants together in some form of energetic collaboration is to continually remind ourselves that differentiation doesn't mean better than or less than. Obviously, Friends fell into a trap in doing this in the 18th and 19th century, and I'm sure at many other times by reading people out of meeting when they didn't fit the test. Okay, quick on this. Prophets and midwives, those friends who are able to bring new insight into the Holy Spirit and into the Spirit's motion, and make Spirit available through vocal ministry, preaching, teaching, etc. The work of ministers. The work of midwives or elders, those who also are full of the Holy Spirit, who have a deep knowledge and wisdom in the Quaker path, and to help ground both the ministers and help prepare the ground and the hearers. Help that message and that spirit be accessible and hearable. And the work of stewards, which perhaps is easily thought of or conventionally thought of as that was Stephen's job. He was going to make sure that the money got to the right place. We could think of that kind of reactionally as the work of our making sure there's a roof over our heads, or that people have enough to eat, or that the bills get paid. But in a bigger sense, as Noah points out, the work of stewards is helping people clear space so we can hear the voice. Now, obviously that can look like a physical space in a meeting room now, but friends of old in that role would invite friends to investigate their lives and find the places where the busyness of the world and the empire are crowding out their ability to hear the Spirit. Those two essential functions, with that important prerequisite of Holy Spirit and wisdom, seem to me the two things that are necessary, and maybe even would be the standing structures of could be the standing structures of a meeting. And that there are all sorts of then other ways that don't involve committees that we could do our work together. We could have working groups, as we've been experimenting with for several years, that have a specific purpose and then dissolve because that purpose is fulfilled. And I know here in Portland Friends Meeting, and I know elsewhere around the yearly meeting, we are experimenting with faithfulness groups, small groups that help us work on that listening together with mutual encouragement and perhaps, an uplift. So I posit this in some ways as just dropping a stone in the pond, but this is serious. The times are serious. And as Paul says, it is time to put away childish things and for us to drill down to the essential of the motions of the Spirit that we need to power us in these times. And not pretend that structures and traditions and ways that we think things are supposed to be done will necessarily get us to where we need to be in a time where everything is rapidly changing more and more. All right, enough with the scary stuff. Now we talk about money. That was a joke. In coming into this next piece for today and tomorrow, I want to start by reading a little section of a pamphlet from James Naylor titled The Lamb's War. In this, he clarifies that the work is not reduced either to inward, internal spiritual work, nor in personal transformation, nor to external fighting the bad out there, but it is, that political and economic reform work, but is at the intersection of both of those things. He sums up what friends then called the Lamb's War, saying, "Their war is not against creatures, not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness exalted in the hearts of men and women, against the whole work and device of the God of this world, laws, customs, fashions, inventions. This is all enmity against the Lamb and her followers, who are entered into the covenant which was in the beginning. The Lamb has come to take the government to herself, that God alone may wholly rule in the heart of people, and people wholly live in the work of God." So the first thing I want to just touch on today is going to be about money and debt, which I have come to see as one of the cornerstones of the problematic dynamics that we are up against and perpetuate the system of domination and extraction, hierarchy, etc. And I rejoice and am grateful that the biblical tradition has woven throughout it a strand that is trying to push back against the rule of that and to offer an alternative way of thinking about resources and security. And I want to start with, I don't know why I'm in Luke this week. It's Luke. With Luke chapter 12, 16 through 20. Then Jesus told them this parable. There was once a rich man who had land and which bore good crops. He began to think to himself, I don't have a place to keep all my crops. What can I do? This is what I will do, he said. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, where I will store the grain and all my other goods. Then I will say to myself, lucky man, you have all the good things you need for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and enjoy your retirement. Yourself. But God said to him, you fool, this very night you will have to give up your life. Then who will get all these things that you have kept for yourself? This biblical dynamic pulls out over and over again a difference between stagnation and accumulation and flow and trust. Here, the rich man thinks that security is in having enough, and having enough to keep one going by oneself with your own barns and your own food and drink. But God judges that. Not only God judges that, but the immediacy of life judges that. And in the verses that follow in this chapter, Jesus talks about the beautiful lilies of the field and how they trust, and the crows that eat and they don't, labor too hard and they don't save up and all that sort of stuff. I don't want to harp on it too much. But back at the beginning of this book in Exodus, God and Moses show his people as they were wandering in the desert a different way of relating. Exodus 16. I'm not going to read it straight, but just tell the story. What happens in Exodus 16 is that the Israelites are in the desert and people are grumbling. People are hungry. People are questioning God. And God says, I've heard the grumbling. And at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. And the bread came with special instructions. It said, take as much as you need, because there'll be plenty. But no one is to keep any of it until morning. Some of them paid no attention, of course, gathered a lot, because what about tomorrow? Who knows? And there was plenty of bread, but those who kept it until morning found that it was full of maggots and began to smell. And Moses was angry. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. And on the sixth day, they gathered twice as much. And the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. And he said, this is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be the day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil, and save whatever is left and keep it until morning. and on the Sabbath, it was still good the next day. I raise these two stories up as examples of the paradigm shift that we need It's a paradigm shift that I don't have a program for. But one that is going to involve us knowing each other and working with each other intimately, trusting each other, and trusting in the Spirit, that the Spirit will provide. Trusting in our relationship with the earth, that the earth will provide. In her book, Pilgrim on Tinker Creek, Annie Dillard talks about how everything in the world is, I don't remember if it's munched upon or nibbled at. That the way that creation feeds us is not through accumulation, but through unending abundance. Not through stagnation and hoarding, but by bountiful gifting. That there is always enough leaves, although we're infested with brown-tailed moths here in Maine, so things are maybe crazy in these modern times, but there are always enough leaves for the caterpillar to eat and have enough to grow into the butterfly that it needs to be, and for the tree to do what it needs to do for the year. I want to close this with looking at one very specific manifestation of our relationship to money. And that is debt and interest. Money in its modern form, unlike the trees that get nibbled, is the only thing in the natural world that doesn't naturally degrade, but that we for some reason have some expectation that it will on its own grow. That because there is money, or a pile of it, we have internalized the expectation that it should be getting bigger, which at the base is essentially saying that the privilege and riches I have should be used to go out and take other privileges and riches from others and accumulate them to me. In his giant book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years, David Graeber looks at how that technology or that piece of the domination system has driven civilizations, cultures, and individuals to great destruction. And he spends a bit of time looking at the Spanish conquest of the Americas. and says any number of civilizations have probably been in a position to wreak havoc on the scale that European powers did in the 16th and 17th centuries. Ming China itself was an obvious candidate, but almost none actually did so. And he looks at the brutal acts of Hernan Cortez and the gold and silver mines in the Americas, which enslaved and slaughtered untold millions, as many by those methods as contemporary observers noted as by the smallpox that was introduced at the time. And he digs in and finds one startling answer to why this incredible amount of destruction. Because they had to pay back their creditors, and they had to pay back their creditors with interest. He goes on, if all this seems suspiciously reminiscent of the Fourth Crusade, with its indebted knights stripping whole foreign cities of their wealth and still somehow winding up only one step ahead of their creditors, there's a reason. The financial capital that backed these expeditions came from more or less the same place, if in this case, Genoa, not Venice. What's more, that relationship between the, I'm going to put air quotes around this, the daring adventurer on one hand, the gambler willing to take any sort of risk, and on the other, the careful financier whose entire operations are organized around producing steady, mathematical, inexorable growth of income, lies at the very heart of what we now call capitalism. All this helps explain why the church has been so uncompromising in its attitude towards usury. It was not just a philosophical question. It was a matter of moral rivalry. And to be clear, not rivalry in how moral people were, but rivalry among the morals inwardly. Money always has the potential to become a moral imperative unto itself. Allow it to expand and it can quickly become a morality so imperative that all others seem frivolous in comparison. For the debtor, the world is reduced to a collection of potential dangers, potential tools, and potential merchandise. Even human relations become a matter of cost-benefit calculation. Clearly, this is the way the conquistadors viewed the world that they set out to conquer. It's the peculiar feature of modern capitalism to create social arrangements that essentially force us to think this way. The structure of the corporation is a telling case in point, and it's no coincidence that the first major joint stock corporations in the world were the English and Dutch East India companies, ones that pursued that very same combination of exploration, conquest, and extraction, as did the conquistadors. It's a structure designed to eliminate all moral imperatives but profit. The prohibition on usury goes all the way back to Moses. And the noticing about, well, to Moses, both in a prohibition on usury, in the Levitical laws of Jubilee, where those who were held captive as debtors were set free, and continued into Jesus's formulation, or at least Luke's formulation of Jesus's prayer, the Our Father. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. I think you can see there the large structural questions at play. And I can certainly feel the tension in my own body around what I was told to be the source of security and what I was entitled to. But to view our lives and to view the creation into which we were born as gifts and then to treat it as a commodity is both desecration to that creation and is setting ourselves up into a trap in which the supposed moral imperative of paying back our debts often makes it very hard to hear that still small voice. Friends, I don't know what this means for us in specific. The long-term plan for ending capitalism, but as we have started to work on questions and investigate our relationship to money and to the possibility of reparations here at Portland Friends meeting over the last year, we've had to start looking at these questions head on. Now, reparations is clearly not going to be easy. But to return that which has been stolen shouldn't be a far step for us to take. I pray as we undertake that work, knowing that it is just a first step, that we are able to feel the underlying assurance the security of trusting in a God that creates abundance, who allows the rain to shine, the sun to shine on all and the rain to fall on all. That we can come to trust that the gifts and the daily bread will be given us. And that we are able to feel the release of allowing it to pass on and circulate and flow to where it needs to go next.